You may have heard the phrase correlation does not equal causation before. It's a pretty important idea, even if you don't ever think about research again. So I wanted to take a couple minutes to explain why we say that and why it's an important idea. Many textbooks and resources talk about extraneous variables in the context of experimental design, and only in that context. Understanding the overall idea, though, can help you understand why we say correlation doesn't equal causation and why it's important. An extraneous variable is anything that varies along with the measured and manipulated variables in the study. In an experiment, the process of manipulating the independent variable also helps us control extraneous variables. In non-experimental studies, though, the lack of manipulation means that extraneous variables could be influencing the variables being studied. So even if the results find the variables are related, it might be because of the influence of an extraneous variable, not because one of the measured variables caused a change in another one of the measured variables. Day-to-day life is like the non-experimental studies. We might be focused on one thing, but there are always other things going on. That's what we would call the third variable problem in non-experimental research. For example, we might notice that we eat a lot when we're stressed. In the language of research, we would say that eating is positively correlated with stress. But that doesn't necessarily mean stress causes us to eat more. And maybe when we get hungry, we unconsciously interpret the physiological signs as stress, so we feel more stressed than usual. Or maybe some social situations that have food involved also cause stress, so we associate stress with eating, but the situation is influencing both. The third variable problem relates to the extraneous variables, but there's another research term that contributes to the reason we need to be careful about what we say causes a change. It's called the directionality problem. It basically means we need to be careful about saying one variable causes a change in another variable because it could be the other way around. If we continue with the example of stress and eating, the directionality problem refers to the idea that stress could cause changes in eating, but eating could also cause changes in stress. Some of the fallacies in thinking we've learned about earlier in class can create misperceptions about the direction of cause and effect in day-to-day life, as can other psychological phenomena. Experiments help us rule out third variables and determine directionality by manipulating the independent variable. The specific process, including what does and what does not happen, help rule out cause and effect. The fact that the different levels or conditions of the independent variable are held constant helps determine the direction of causation. And we'll talk about some of the trade-offs that come along with those processes in another module. From the perspective of a researcher, understanding how the design relates to the conclusions we draw is important to make sure we design a study that actually answers the questions we have or tests the predictions we make. If the purpose of the study relates to cause and effect, a researcher also needs to make sure the experiment rules out alternative explanations. As consumers of research, understanding what's required to understand cause and effect helps us avoid errors in interpreting the findings of studies. In the design recording, I also pointed out that we can't always rely on the wording in the article, so understanding this for ourselves helps us make use of the findings, even if an error slips past the editors. When we're practicing savvy skepticism, this knowledge helps us identify potential third variables and directionality errors in others' claims. That, in turn, can help us surface assumptions and agendas. If this class only teaches you one thing, I'd probably be okay if it's that you know why we say correlation doesn't equal causation. Each day we make countless decisions based on assumptions about cause and effect, whether we realize it or not. In some cases, it probably doesn't matter if we don't really think about it much, and it might not be too big of a deal if we ruin dinner because we confused correlation and causation. In some cases, though, confusing the two can cause us a lot of money and impact our health and well-being.